Silence is never empty inside a submarine. It breathes. It hums. It presses against you from every direction until you stop noticing it as sound and start accepting it as presence. I learned that early in my career, long before this patrol, long before the echo. I sit at the sonar console the way I always do, shoulders relaxed, spine straight, headset resting lightly against my ears. The room is dim by design. Red lighting washes over the panels so our eyes never fully adjust. Screens glow softly with data streams that mean nothing to anyone except the people trained to read them. To the rest of the crew, sonar is just noise and graphs. To me, it is the ocean speaking in a language of pressure and delay. Every sound has a source. Every return has a cause. That belief is the foundation of my job. The submarine moves forward at a controlled crawl deep enough that sunlight is a memory. Steel creaks gently around us as the pressure equalizes. Pumps cycle. Fans whisper. Somewhere behind me, a valve ticks in a slow, patient rhythm. I catalog it all without thinking. Familiar noise. Harmless noise. Sonar teaches you discipline. You do not react to every anomaly. You do not chase every strange return. Water is chaotic. Temperature layers bend sound. Salinity shifts distort it. Marine life moves in ways that look impossible until you understand them. If you panic every time the ocean behaves strangely, you do not last long in this role. That is why we have rules. They are not posted on the wall. They are not announced during briefings. They are passed quietly from operator to operator, usually late at night when the boat is steady and the ocean feels close enough to touch. Rules about what to log. Rules about what to ignore. Rules about when curiosity becomes liability. One rule stands apart from the rest. Ignore anomalous deep water returns that do not resolve within standard propagation models. No explanation, no exceptions, just ignore it. I remember the first time my instructor mentioned it. He did not look at me when he said it. He just adjusted his chair and lowered his voice, as if the ocean itself might be listening through the hull. I laughed it off back then. Every job has its superstitions. Every crew carries stories they pretend are jokes. Now, years later, I believe in the rule as much as I believe in physics. The watch is routine. We are mapping a section of seabed no one will ever visit, verifying charts that already exist. My hands move automatically across the controls as I monitor passive returns. Distant ship traffic paints faint lines across the display. Thermal layers show up exactly where they should. Everything is orderly, predictable. That is when I notice the gap. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is a small irregularity beneath the lowest thermal boundary, a faint return that should not exist. Sound should scatter there. It always does. Yet this return comes back clean, delayed by a fraction of a second that does not fit any known profile. I lean closer to the screen, more out of habit than concern. My pulse stays steady. An interference spike, I tell myself. Equipment drift. A microbubble field. There are a dozen explanations that do not require imagination. I run a quick system check. Everything reads nominal. The return appears again. Same depth, same spacing, same quiet persistence. I do not feel fear. Not yet. I feel annoyance. Data that does not behave is a problem to be solved, not a threat to be feared. I adjust the filters and narrow the bandwidth. The echo sharpens slightly, like something responding to attention. I stop. That is the first moment I remember clearly. The moment I choose discipline over curiosity. The rule surfaces in my mind, uninvited but firm. Ignore anomalous deep water returns. I exhale slowly and widen the filter again, letting the signal blur back into statistical noise. My hand moves to the log. Interference, environmental artifact, no operational impact. I type the words without hesitation. Professionals do not editorialize. Professionals do not speculate. We record what matters and discard what does not. That is how you survive years underwater without letting the ocean get inside your head. I lean back in my chair and let my gaze drift across the room. The other operators are focused on their stations. No one has noticed anything unusual. The submarine continues forward, unaware of my momentary distraction. The echo does not vanish. It fades just enough to sit at the edge of perception, like a thought you almost remember. I tell myself that if it matters, it will resolve on its own. Everything always does. I adjust my headset and settle back into the rhythm of the watch. At the time, I truly believe the entry I wrote. At the time, I believe that silence means safety. I do not yet understand that some things are quiet because they are listening. Rules age differently than people. They do not soften. They do not forget why they were written. They just wait for the next person who thinks they know better. I learned the Sonar rules the same way everyone does, through repetition and quiet correction. Most of them are practical. Log everything twice. Trust passive data over active returns. Never assume silence means absence. They are written in manuals thick enough to stop a bullet, revised every few years as technology changes. But there is another set of rules that never makes it into official documentation. They exist in margins, in old binders that smell like dust and oil, in handwritten notes passed between operators who have served too long to believe everything they are told. These rules do not have authors. They do not have dates. They are simply there. During my second year aboard, I was assigned to clean out a storage locker near Sonar Control. It was full of outdated training material, obsolete schematics, and binders stamped with classifications no one uses anymore. Most of it was meant for disposal. I flipped through them anyway. Curiosity is a quiet habit in this line of work. That is where I saw it. A single page tucked into the back of an old procedural manual. Yellowed, creased. The ink faded everywhere except one line that had been retraced over and over. Ignore the Kraken echo. Someone had underlined it in red, hard enough to score the paper. There was no context, no paragraph explaining what a Kraken echo was supposed to be, no incident report attached, just that line, isolated and final. It unsettled me in a way I could not explain, not because of the name, but because of how deliberate the instruction felt. Not identify, not classify, ignore. When I asked my supervisor about it later, he closed the binder without looking at the page. He told me that older operators had a habit of dramatizing normal anomalies. He said names stick longer than explanations. Then he told me to focus on my duties and forget what I had read. I told myself the same thing. Now, days after logging the first strange return, I sit through a routine calibration sweep that should be mindless. We run them at scheduled intervals to ensure the array behaves as expected. Controlled pings, known reflections, predictable returns. I initiate the sequence and watch the display fill with clean data. Everything lines up. The ocean behaves. Then the echo appears again. It rises from below the thermal layer like it has always been there, waiting for me to look. Stronger now, sharper. The return curve is smooth in a way that makes my stomach tight. Natural formations scatter sound. Living things distort it. This does neither. I feel heat creep up my neck as I freeze, hand hovering above the controls. My first instinct is to check for system error. I rerun diagnostics without changing the sweep parameters. The echo persists. I isolate the frequency band. The shape becomes clearer. It has geometry. Not a shape I recognize, but a coherence that feels intentional. The return does not fluctuate with current shifts. It does not pulse like biological mass. It does not fracture like rock. It simply exists, occupying a volume of water that should not return sound so cleanly. I think of the red underline. I think of the word Kraken, absurd and heavy with myth. I almost laugh, a short breath that never becomes sound. Rules exist to prevent panic, I tell myself. They exist to keep people from overreacting to data they do not understand yet. That is all this is. Something new, something unexplained. The echo strengthens again, as if responding to my attention. I lower the gain slightly. It compensates. That is when the fear arrives. Not sharp, not explosive. It is a slow tightening in my chest, a pressure that feels uncomfortably familiar to the depth we are traveling at. I become acutely aware of my breathing, of the hum of the submarine, of the fact that nothing else in the room has changed. I am the only one who sees it. I consider alerting the watch officer. That is protocol for unexplained returns, yet the rule echoes louder than procedure. Ignore the Kraken echo. The wording is specific. This is not just anomalous. It matches the description I never wanted to believe existed. I log the calibration as successful and flag the return as environmental interference. My fingers hesitate for half a second before I finish typing. I feel like I am erasing something important. The echo remains on the display even after the sweep ends. Passive mode picks it up without effort now. It sits beneath us, unbothered by our silence. I tell myself it is coincidence, that the rule is a relic of older technology misinterpreting deep water physics, that we know better now. Still, I cannot bring myself to look away. The geometry is wrong in a way that feels personal. It does not suggest mass alone. It suggests structure, as if the water itself has arranged around an absence too precise to be accidental. I adjust my chair and sit back, forcing my hands to relax. Panic would make me sloppy. Sloppy people do not survive long in enclosed steel tubes miles beneath the surface. Rules are not truths, I remind myself. They are safeguards. They are compromises made by people who came before us, based on fears that may no longer be relevant. That thought comforts me for exactly 3 seconds. Then the echo shifts. Not closer, not farther. It changes orientation, rotating its return profile in a way that makes no physical sense. My heart stutters. I swallow hard and check the clock. Time has passed normally. Nothing else has deviated. The echo does not behave like something being detected. It behaves like something acknowledging detection. I do not write that anywhere. I do not say it out loud. I log interference again and end the calibration. The submarine continues on its course, unaware of my internal recalibration of reality. The ocean above and below remains dark and indifferent. I tell myself that rules exist to protect people from fear. I do not yet consider the possibility that this rule exists to protect something else from being noticed. I shut down the console for the watch change and stand slowly, careful not to draw attention. As I step away, I feel the echo linger in my awareness like a low-frequency vibration that refuses to fade. I have memorized the rule now, not as words on a page, but as a weight behind my eyes. Ignore the Kraken echo. I suspect that whatever named it never had the chance to ignore it for long. Thermal layers are honest. They are one of the few things in the ocean that never pretend to be something else. Warm water floats above cold. Salinity changes bend sound like glass bends light. Sonar operators learn early that temperature gradients are the ocean's way of breaking lies apart. Anything large moving through them leaves fingerprints. Anything solid fractures returns into scattered noise. That is why I trust thermal data more than any chart or model. Physics does not care about fear. It only answers to rules older than language. On my next watch, I decide to do what I should have done the first time. I map the entire water column with deliberate patience. No shortcuts, no assumptions. If the echo is real, it will reveal itself through consistency. If it is interference, it will collapse under scrutiny. I begin with passive listening. I let the ocean speak without interruption. The layers appear on my display exactly where they should. A clean thermocline sits like a soft ceiling above colder depths. Beneath it, Temperature drops in predictable steps, each one a filter that should degrade sound further. The echo is there. It sits below the deepest layer unchanged. Its return does not scatter. It does not smear. It does not weaken. It passes through every thermal boundary as if they are not there at all. My fingers tight against the edge of the console. I zoom in and adjust resolution. The return sharpens instead of breaking apart. That alone is enough to unsettle me. Sound should lose coherence with distance and depth. This does the opposite. It becomes more defined the more I isolate it. I tell myself to breathe, to work the problem. I run diagnostics on the hydrophone array. Each sensor reports normal function, no phase drift, no dead zones. I cross-check against redundant systems. Same result. I pull archived environmental data for the region. Temperature profiles match expected seasonal patterns. Salinity is stable. Current flow is mild. Nothing here explains what I am seeing. I switch displays and overlay propagation models. According to every equation I know, this return should not exist. Sound should refract upward. It should disperse into noise. Instead, the echo remains intact, a quiet certainty beneath us. I feel unease creep in, slow and insistent. This is the kind of unease that comes when trusted tools stop agreeing with each other, when experience offers no familiar explanation. It is not panic, it is something worse. It is doubt. I initiate a controlled frequency sweep, still passive, just listening across bands. The echo responds consistently, maintaining shape across ranges where it should blur. That suggests scale, something large enough that wavelength variations do not matter. Something vast. My mouth feels dry. I swallow and force myself to stay methodical. I log each adjustment, each confirmation, each agreement between systems. The evidence accumulates quietly, line by line. The echo is not a glitch. It is not noise. It is not an artifact of outdated equipment or environmental chaos. It is a reflection. That realization lands heavier than I expect. Reflection implies surface, boundary, something that sound strikes and returns from without distortion. But there is nothing in the charts, no seamounts, no trenches deep enough to explain it, no geological formation with that geometry. I sit back and stare at the display longer than necessary. The echo does not move closer. It does not retreat. It holds position relative to us with a patience that feels deliberate. As we drift forward, its depth reading remains constant, like a fixed reference point in a moving world. That should not happen. I feel a prickling sensation along my arms, the kind that usually comes before a stress response. My heartbeat picks up, then steadies as training takes over. Fear does not help analysis. Fear gets people killed. I consider reporting it. That thought circles my mind, slow and cautious. Protocol demands it. Unexplained returns at depth warrant escalation. That is drilled into us. Then the rule surfaces again. Ignore anomalous deep water returns. Not suppress, not delete, ignore. I realize something then that makes my stomach sink. Ignoring is an active choice. It requires awareness. You cannot ignore something you have not recognized. That means whoever wrote the rules saw this echo too, saw it clearly enough to name it, clearly enough to underline it in red. Silence feels safer than disbelief. If I report it, I invite questions, scrutiny, attention. Attention travels. It spreads through command structures, through analysts and committees, and people who have never sat in a quiet sonar room at depth. If I stay silent, the echo remains contained, known only to me, logged as noise, forgotten. At least that is what I tell myself. I glance around the room. No one is watching me. The other operators are absorbed in their own data streams. The submarine hums on, indifferent to my internal debate. I lower the display brightness slightly, and widen the filter just enough to blur the echo back toward the edge of perception. It resists, maintaining coherence longer than it should before finally softening. The act feels wrong, like deliberately unfocusing your eyes on something that wants to be seen. I write another entry in the log: environmental anomaly, no operational impact, monitoring recommended. The words feel thin. As the watch progresses, the echo remains, always there, always quiet. It does not pulse. It does not fluctuate. It simply exists beneath us, an immovable certainty in a medium defined by motion. I catch myself glancing at it between routine checks, my eyes drawn back again and again. Each time it looks the same: vast, slow, deliberate. The ocean is reflecting something. Not aggressively, not urgently. Patiently. When my relief arrives, I brief them on the watch like any other. I do not mention the echo. I shut down my console and remove my headset, but the sense of pressure does not leave my head. As I step out of sonar control, I feel like I am carrying something with me. Not data, not fear. Awareness. Thermal layers do not lie. They never have. They tell the truth even when we do not want to hear it. That truth is sitting beneath us, unchanged by physics I trust, waiting in silence that no longer feels empty. I do not report it yet. I am not ready to explain what I do not understand. And part of me suspects that understanding it might be exactly what the rule was written to prevent. The drill order comes down mid-watch, crisp and unremarkable. Simulated evasion, acoustic concealment exercise, something familiar enough to pull my mind away from the echo without requiring explanation. I welcome it more than I should. Drills have structure. Structure feels safe. The boat shifts posture as control adjusts depth and heading. Systems hum a little louder as power redistributes. In sonar, the room tightens with quiet focus. This is what we train for: false contacts, phantom pursuers, the art of disappearing in water that remembers everything. I reset my displays and prepare to track simulated threats. The echo is still there, muted but present beneath the noise floor. I tell myself it will fade once maneuvering begins. Thermal turbulence usually shreds anything subtle. The drill starts. We change course sharply, angling down and then leveling out. Speed increases in short bursts before dropping again. Control feeds us vectors to evade an imaginary adversary that does not exist. The echo adjusts. At first I think I am imagining it. Pattern recognition is dangerous in this job. The mind wants to connect dots even when they are not there. I force myself to wait, to observe. We change heading again. The echo rotates its return profile. Not later, not approximately. Immediately. My throat tightens. I track it carefully now, pretending it is just another false target injected into the exercise. But no drill controller would design something like this. It does not close distance. It does not pursue us like a predator or a weapon system would. It positions itself. Every maneuver we make, it maintains an orientation that feels intentional. Always beneath, always offset in a way that keeps it acoustically optimal relative to our hull, as if it understands our geometry better than we do. I feel sweat gather at the base of my neck. My hands move on instinct, adjusting filters and displays to isolate the behavior. The clearer I make the data, the more undeniable it becomes. This is not a chase. It is a response. The drill script calls for an abrupt depth change. The submarine dips, steel groaning softly as pressure increases. I watch the echo carefully, expecting lag or distortion. There is none. It compensates instantly, maintaining the same relative relationship as if space itself has folded to accommodate it. The return does not grow louder or weaker. It simply remains correct. I stop thinking about myths, about names scribbled in red ink. My mind shifts fully into analytical mode, and that frightens me more than panic would. Analysis strips away denial. Attention feels reciprocal. The thought arrives unbidden, heavy, and unwelcome. The more I watch it, the more it behaves as if being watched matters. Not in a conscious way I can explain, more like feedback, like sound reflecting differently once it knows where to go. I try to look away. I force my eyes back to the drill displays and track simulated contacts like I am supposed to. Yet my awareness keeps drifting downward, pulled by the quiet certainty beneath us. Another maneuver, another immediate adjustment. The echo never leads us. It never follows. It stays where it needs to be to remain fully aware of our movement. I begin to understand the wording of the rule in a way I never had before. Ignore. Not because it is harmless, because interaction sharpens it. Investigation implies probing. Probing implies signal. Signal invites response. Whatever this is, it does not need to move to react. It just needs us to keep paying attention. The drill continues for nearly an hour. I lose track of time, anchored to the rhythm of maneuver and response. No one else comments on anything unusual. To them, this is just another exercise, another line item in a long patrol. To me, it feels like being measured. When the drill ends, control announces a return to normal operations. The submarine steadies, speed reducing, heading locking in. Systems power down from their heightened state. I wait for the echo to fade. It does not. Without the chaos of maneuvering, it becomes even clearer, perfectly stable, perfectly positioned, as if the exercise itself was irrelevant, as if it had simply been watching us practice. Waiting. My chest feels tight, not with fear but with the weight of implication. This thing does not care about our drills. It does not mistake them for threats. It does not react defensively. It observes. I log the drill performance as required, keeping my language precise and boring. No anomalies detected. All systems nominal. My fingers hesitate once before moving on. The echo remains unmentioned. I lean back in my chair and close my eyes for a moment longer than regulation allows. Behind my eyelids, I can still see the shape of the return, steady and unchanging. I realize something then that settles cold in my stomach. If this echo mirrors us so perfectly during a drill, then it has been listening longer than I have been watching. Probably longer than any of us have been alive. The rule was never about preventing distraction during operations. It was about avoiding engagement. Because whatever sits beneath us does not chase targets. It waits for them to reveal themselves. When I open my eyes again, the display looks the same as it always has. Numbers, lines, quiet certainty. The echo is still there. Waiting. And for the first time since I logged it as interference, I am no longer sure it is reacting to us. I am starting to suspect it has always known exactly where we are. I do not sleep after the drill. Sleep on a submarine is never deep, but that night it refuses to come at all. Every time I close my eyes, I feel the weight of depth pressing inward, not on the hull, but on my thoughts. The echo sits there in my mind with the same patience it shows on the display. By the time my next watch approaches, I have already decided what I am going to do. Accessing archived patrol data is not difficult if you know how systems talk to each other. Maintenance credentials exist to keep old software from locking up the boat. They are meant for updates and diagnostics, not curiosity. Still, they open doors that normal access does not. I justify it the way everyone does. I tell myself this is professional due diligence, that understanding anomalies improves safety, that ignoring something without context is irresponsible. The archive terminal hums softly as it pulls decades of patrol records from cold storage. Names of submarines scroll past, dates blur together. Most of it is mundane: navigation reports, acoustic contacts, equipment failures. Then I narrow the search. Deep water anomalies, unresolved returns, environmental interference. The list shortens. The first file I open is barely a report at all. Several pages are missing entirely. Others are stamped with redaction codes that replace paragraphs with empty space and time markers with zeros. Someone has gone to great effort to remove not just conclusions, but sequences. Still, not everything is gone. Crew logs remain, personal notes embedded in official language, small deviations that sensors either missed or did not understand. I read slowly. A sonar operator reports persistent low-frequency return beneath thermocline, logged as noise, no follow-up. 3 weeks later, the same patrol notes minor navigation drift during passive operations, gyros recalibrated, no fault found. Another week passes. A medical note mentions widespread insomnia among watchstanders, attributed to stress and long deployment. The patrol ends early. No reason given. I move on to the next file. Different submarine, different ocean, same pattern. First mention of an anomalous deep return, always logged as interference, always ignored. Then subtle changes. Officers note increased error margins in navigation, small disagreements between redundant systems that should never diverge, nothing dramatic enough to justify aborting a mission. Crew notes mention headaches, difficulty concentrating, a vague sense of unease that no one wants to formalize. I feel a tightness in my chest as I scroll. There are no attacks, no hull breaches, no sudden losses, nothing that would make headlines or justify official explanations. Just attrition. Careers end quietly. Operators request reassignment. Officers transfer to shore duty. Some leave the service entirely within months of returning to port. One file contains a disciplinary report that makes my stomach twist. An experienced navigator is reprimanded for refusing to follow plotted courses. He insists the boat feels misaligned. He claims charts are wrong in a way he cannot articulate. Psychological evaluation clears him of delusion, but recommends removal from submarine duty due to persistent anxiety. He never returns to sea. I lean back in my chair and rub my eyes. The red light of the archive room feels harsher than usual, like it is bleeding into my vision. I realize I have been holding my breath. The patterns are impossible to ignore now. Every patrol that logs the echo experiences the same slow unraveling. Not violence, not catastrophe. Influence. I search deeper using older classification tags. The redactions grow heavier the further back I go. Entire patrols reduced to stubs. Dates exist without context. Ships listed without outcomes. One document catches my attention because it is less censored than the rest. It is not a report, it is a memorandum. The language is careful, legal, and terrified. It discusses acoustic phenomena that demonstrate persistent spatial awareness relative to submarine movement. It avoids naming the phenomenon directly, but the phrasing is unmistakable. The document recommends procedural changes. Do not engage, do not attempt classification, do not pursue higher resolution data, maintain operational silence. It warns that prolonged exposure correlates with cognitive drift, emotional dysregulation, and an increased tendency toward introspection and guilt. Guilt. The word feels out of place in a technical document, and that makes it worse. Guilt is not a mechanical failure. It is not environmental stress. It is internal. I think of the echo beneath us, holding position with perfect patience. I think of how it seemed to adjust when I paid attention, how the data sharpened the more I focused. I understand then that whatever this is, it does not need to harm us physically. It changes us. It bends perception just enough to make people doubt their own instincts, to make them feel responsible for errors that are not theirs, to erode confidence slowly until competent professionals no longer trust themselves. That is far more effective than attack. A broken submarine is repaired. A broken crew is replaced. A crew that doubts itself quietly removes itself from relevance. I feel a wave of nausea roll through me, sudden and sharp. I push my chair back and stand, pacing the narrow room. The metal deck vibrates faintly beneath my boots, a reminder that we are still moving through deep water even as I dig through ghosts. This thing has been encountered before. Many times. And every time, the response has been the same. Silence. Ignore it, not because it is harmless, but because acknowledging it changes something fundamental in the people who do. I scroll to the end of the memorandum. The final paragraph is partially redacted, but enough remains to make my hands shake. The phenomenon demonstrates no aggressive intent. Its impact appears limited to prolonged acoustic awareness and the psychological consequences of being perceived. Being perceived. I close the file and sit down heavily. My reflection stares back at me from the darkened screen, pale under red light. I look tired, older than I should. I realize with a slow, sinking certainty that the danger is not what the echo does. It is what it causes us to do to ourselves. I think back to the drill, to the way it positioned itself, to the way it remained after everything ended. No recorded attacks, no dramatic endings. Just people who go home changed. Careers quietly ending. Lives narrowing. I log out of the archive and clear my access trail as best I can. The system accepts my credentials without comment, indifferent to the weight of what it has shown me. As I step back into the corridor, the submarine feels different, smaller, more intimate, like a closed system with too many thoughts circulating inside it. I understand now why the rule was underlined in red. It was not written to protect submarines. It was written to protect the people inside them from something that listens without touching, that influences without speaking. Something vast enough to reach into human minds without ever needing to rise from the deep. As I return to sonar control, the echo greets me with the same quiet certainty as before. I do not feel fear. I feel watched. And for the first time since this began, I suspect that the watching is only the first stage of something much more patient. I stop thinking of it as an echo and start thinking of it as a problem of geometry. Active pinging is forbidden territory now, not by command but by instinct. The archives made that clear. Interaction sharpens influence. So I work quietly, passively, letting the ocean reveal itself on its own terms. Passive reconstruction is an old technique. It is slow and imprecise, built on inference rather than illumination. You collect fragments of reflected sound from distant sources, shipping noise, seismic background, even the subtle hum of our own machinery leaking into the water. Over time, patterns emerge. If something is there, it shapes what passes through it. I begin collecting data during every watch. I do not label it, I do not flag it. I let it accumulate in hidden buffers under routine analysis folders. My heart rate steadies as the work becomes familiar. This is what I know how to do: observe, measure, reconstruct. Days pass, the patrol continues, the echo remains. The more data I gather, the stranger the picture becomes. There is no solid boundary, no surface that reflects sound back in a way that suggests mass. Instead, there is a distortion, a region where sound behaves differently. It curves, it delays, it arrives altered but intact, as if it has passed through something that does not absorb or scatter but redirects. I overlay datasets from different angles and depths. The reconstruction begins to take shape, not as a body, but as a void, a structured absence in the water column that forces sound to bend around it. My hands tremble slightly as I adjust the model parameters. It is not an organism as we define it. There are no limbs, no symmetry, no biological markers. There is no indication of tissue or density gradients consistent with life. Yet it is not empty. The absence has form. It occupies space deliberately, maintaining coherence across variables that should tear it apart. Sound wraps around it the way wind moves around a mountain, revealing shape through deflection rather than impact. I sit back and stare at the ghostly outline forming on the screen. This is what we named Kraken. The name feels childish now, a myth imposed on something too unfamiliar to accept without metaphor. The Kraken suggests tentacles, teeth, hunger. This has none of that. It does not consume. It displaces. I feel a cold pressure behind my eyes as understanding settles in. The echo was never a return from a surface. It was a byproduct of sound navigating an impossible geometry. We were not detecting a thing. We were detecting how the ocean behaves in the presence of something else. I realized then why active sonar feels wrong. A ping assumes a target. It assumes opposition. This does not oppose. It exists and sound adapts. I am suddenly aware of how quiet the room feels, not just acoustically, but emotionally. My breathing sounds loud in my ears. The hum of the submarine feels intrusive, like we are the ones disturbing something ancient and stable. Watched without eyes. The phrase surfaces from nowhere and refuses to leave. There is no directionality to the sensation, no focal point, just a persistent awareness that observation does not require vision. The reconstruction grows clearer over the next few days. The absence spans an area larger than the submarine by orders of magnitude. It is not localized. It is not anchored to a single point. It occupies a region of depth like a condition rather than an object. I test the model against historical data from the archives. The fit is near perfect. This thing has been encountered across oceans, across decades, always in deep water where pressure erases most mistakes. Always passive, always patient. The ocean has learned our language of vibration. That thought hits me with unexpected force. Sonar is not just sound. It is communication. It is how we announce ourselves in a place where light does not reach. We speak in pulses and listen for replies. This thing does not reply. It listens. It understands how we move by how we sound. It understands our size, our speed, our intent, not emotionally but mathematically, as pattern. I think of the way it mirrored our maneuvers during the drill, the way it maintained perfect orientation. That was not reaction, that was comprehension. I feel small then, smaller than I ever have in uniform. We have always assumed the deep ocean is blind, deaf, a place where nothing notices unless we make it notice. That assumption has shaped everything from naval doctrine to exploration. The shape beneath sound suggests otherwise. I begin to wonder how long it has been listening, not just to submarines but to everything, earthquakes, ice calving, the low-frequency heartbeat of the planet itself. Human activity is just another layer of noise, one it has learned to parse. A chill runs through me that has nothing to do with temperature. This is not a predator waiting to strike. It is a system that categorizes. I save the reconstruction and encrypt it under a maintenance tag I know will not be reviewed unless something catastrophic happens. My rational mind tells me this is dangerous. My survival instincts tell me it is necessary. The more clearly I see it, the more aware I become of its presence. Not physically, psychologically. I find myself pausing mid-task, distracted by a sense of being aligned with something vast and indifferent. Not hostile, not benevolent. Just present. I start avoiding mirrors in the narrow corridors. My reflection looks unchanged, but my eyes feel different, sharper, more inward, like I am constantly measuring my own thoughts for coherence. I understand now why crews reported guilt. Being perceived does that. It makes you evaluate yourself through an imagined external lens. You question motives. You doubt decisions. You internalize judgment that does not belong to you. This thing does not accuse. It observes. An observation alone is enough to destabilize minds that evolved to believe they were alone. I sit at the console one night, long after my watch has technically ended, and watch the passive data flow. The absence beneath us holds steady. It does not need to adjust. We are the ones moving within its field. I whisper the name Kraken under my breath and feel foolish immediately. Names imply ownership, understanding. This has neither. It has no need for myth. It exists in a way that makes mythology inevitable. As I shut down the console and remove my headset, the sensation of being watched does not fade. It follows me into the narrow bunk, into shallow sleep filled with shifting spaces and sound bending around unseen shapes. When I wake, my ears ring faintly, as if I have been listening too hard for too long. The ocean has learned our language of vibration. The terrifying part is not that it understands us. It is that it does not need to answer back for us to change. Sleep stops working in small ways before it fails completely. At first, it is just restlessness. People linger a little longer in the mess. Conversations trail off without conclusion. Someone forgets a routine checklist step and laughs it off. Fatigue is common on long patrols, but this feels uneven, selective, like something is pressing on certain minds harder than others. Mine included. When I do sleep, it is shallow and crowded with sensation. I dream of pressure without pain, of depth without motion. There is no falling, no drowning, just the steady awareness of being enclosed inside something immense, not trapped, contained. In the dreams, I am not hunted. I am measured. I wake with my heart beating too slowly, my breathing out of sync with my thoughts. The red lights of the compartment feel too bright. The air tastes metallic. For a moment, I forget where I am and feel a strange disappointment when memory returns. The echo is there when I reach sonar control. It has not moved. It never does. But something about it feels closer, not in distance but in familiarity. I sit down and put on my headset out of habit, then pause. The moment the cups seal over my ears, I feel a subtle pressure, like a hand resting against the back of my skull. The passive feed is quiet, but the absence beneath us feels louder than any sound. I watch the display and notice something that makes my stomach tighten. The modulation of the return has changed. It is subtle enough that I might have missed it days ago. A gentle oscillation in the signal coherence, a slow rise and fall that matches a rhythm I recognize too late. My breathing. I hold my breath. The oscillation steadies, then slows. I exhale carefully. It resumes. The room feels suddenly smaller. The air feels thick, resistant. I pull the headset off and push it away, my pulse quickening despite my effort to stay calm. This is not possible, I tell myself. Correlation is not causation. Fatigue creates patterns where none exist. Stress makes the mind unreliable. Still, my hands shake slightly as I rest them on the console. I stop wearing the headset off duty after that. I tell myself it is to give my ears a break. No one questions it. Sonar operators are protective of their hearing. It is an easy excuse. It does not help. Even without the equipment, I feel a faint vibration behind my temples, like a memory of sound rather than sound itself. It comes and goes, never strong enough to hurt, never weak enough to ignore. Ignoring it now feels like lying to myself. I start noticing changes in the crew. One of the younger operators develops dark circles under his eyes that never fade. He jokes about insomnia, but his laughter sounds forced. Another crew member snaps at a minor correction and apologizes immediately, visibly shaken by his own reaction. People are quieter, more inward. No one talks about nightmares, but I see it in the way they stare at nothing during off hours, the way they rub their temples, the way conversations drift toward regret and unfinished thoughts. I overhear a quiet argument between two officers about a navigational adjustment that should be trivial. They both insist the charts feel wrong, though neither can explain why. The echo remains silent and constant. I begin to dread the moments of stillness most of all. When the submarine is running quietly, when there is nothing to focus on but background noise, that is when the sensation grows strongest. Not fear, awareness. Like standing in a room, knowing someone is behind you without hearing them move. I try grounding techniques, counting breaths, focusing on physical sensations. It helps for a few minutes at a time. Then the sense of being aligned with something vast returns, pressing gently but persistently against my thoughts. In my dreams, the absence beneath us grows clearer, not visually, but conceptually. I dream of standing inside a cathedral made of water, its walls defined by curves sound cannot cross. I dream of equations resolving into shapes too large to comprehend. I wake from these dreams feeling evaluated. During one watch, I catch myself adjusting my posture unconsciously, as if presentation matters. The realization horrifies me. I force myself to slouch slightly to break the instinct. The echo does not change. I start to understand that it is not responding to conscious behavior. It is responding to coherence, to patterns of activity, to consistency. Breathing, movement, thought. The ocean has learned our language of vibration, and that language includes us. I consider reporting my symptoms: insomnia, head pressure, the creeping sense of observation, but I know where that path leads: medical evaluation, stress management, quiet reassignment. Another career ending softly. Instead, I keep working. The act of monitoring gives me a sense of control, even as I know it is an illusion. The echo modulates gently, always present, always patient. It does not intrude. It does not demand. It waits. One night, lying in my bunk, I press my palms against my ears until they ache. The vibration does not stop. It is not sound in the traditional sense. It is resonance, carried through bone and thought rather than air. I realize then that even if the submarine surfaced and I walked onto dry land, this awareness would not vanish immediately. The archives mention that too. The lingering effects. The difficulty adjusting back to a world where nothing listens unless you speak. Ignoring it was supposed to keep it distant. Now, ignoring it feels like pretending I am alone in a room where I can feel someone breathing just behind me. Sleep finally comes in fragments, interrupted by sudden clarity rather than fear. Moments where everything aligns and makes a terrible kind of sense. We are not being targeted. We are being included. And inclusion, once granted, is very difficult to reverse. By the time my next watch arrives, my exhaustion has hardened into something else, a thin layer of resolve stretched over unease. If I am going to carry this awareness, I need to understand its limits. I sit down at the console, hands steady despite the pressure behind my eyes, and bring the echo back into focus. It sharpens immediately. Not closer, clearer, as if pleased that I have stopped lying to myself. I rehearse the report in my head for hours before I send it. Not the truth, an abstraction, something technical enough to justify attention, vague enough to avoid triggering protocols I do not fully understand. I strip it of language that implies intent or awareness. I reduce it to metrics and inconsistencies, geometry without implication. Even then, my hands hesitate over the terminal. Once this goes up the chain, it does not come back down unchanged. I submit the report during a scheduled data transmission window, wrapped inside routine sonar diagnostics. It is clean, professional, detached. It asks for clarification on long-term anomalous returns that persist across thermal layers and remain stable relative to vessel movement. I expect questions. I expect delays. I expect skepticism. What I do not expect is how fast the response comes. Less than an hour later, command acknowledges receipt. The message is short, precise, calm in a way that makes my stomach drop. Thank you for the update. Resume baseline operations. Do not pursue further analysis of the referenced anomaly. No additional reporting is required. That is it. No request for raw data, no follow-up questions, no attempt to verify my findings, just instruction. Ignore it. I feel a strange mix of relief and dread wash through me. Relief that I am not alone in this. Dread because of what that implies. Command knows. I request a secure voice channel under the pretense of clarifying reporting standards. It is granted without delay. The officer on the other end speaks with the measured cadence of someone who has had this conversation before. He does not let me finish my first question. You are not wrong, he says calmly, but you are also not responsible for understanding it. The words land with unexpected weight. I ask how long this phenomenon has been observed. He deflects with ease, citing classification levels and need to know. When I push, gently, he does not grow irritated. He grows reassuring. There is no threat to the vessel, he says. There is no hostile intent. The safest course of action is to return to baseline operations and discontinue focused attention. Discontinue attention. Not investigation, not interaction. Attention. I realize then that my abstraction did not fool anyone. They know exactly what I am describing. They recognized it immediately. I ask why the rule exists, why it is written the way it is, why it uses a name that sounds like myth instead of a designation. There is a pause on the line, not long, just long enough to feel deliberate. Because disbelief is manageable, he says, awareness is not. The conversation ends shortly after that. No threats, no warnings, just calm efficiency and an assurance that my career is not at risk if I follow instructions. The relief in his voice is unmistakable, not relief that I reported it. Relief that I am willing to stop looking. I disconnect and sit alone in Sonar control, staring at the darkened display. The echo remains, steady and unremarkable now that I am no longer actively modeling it. The rule was never about disbelief. That realization settles slowly, like sediment in still water. It was about containment. You cannot erase something that exists. You cannot destroy something you barely comprehend, but you can limit how many people become aware of it. You can keep awareness shallow, fragmented, and easily dismissed. You can teach people to ignore. I feel a flicker of anger then, sharp and unexpected, not at command but at myself. I thought I was uncovering something hidden. I was only retracing a well-worn path. This has happened before. It always ends the same way. I return to baseline operations as ordered. I widen filters. I reduce resolution. I stop collecting passive reconstruction data. I do my job the way it is written, not the way it can be done. The echo fades into background noise. Not gone, just unremarkable. The pressure behind my eyes lessens slightly. The vibration in my skull becomes easier to ignore. The crew seems calmer too, though I may be imagining it. Awareness is contagious, so is relief. But something has changed. I cannot unlearn what I know. Command did not argue with me. They did not deny the phenomenon. They did not challenge my interpretation. They simply removed permission to engage with it. That tells me more than any classified briefing could. This thing does not need secrecy. It needs scarcity of attention. I think of the archive patrols, of operators quietly reassigned, of careers ending without explanation. Not punished, protected, removed from environments where awareness might deepen. Containment of awareness. That phrase repeats in my mind long after my watch ends. Lying in my bunk, I feel the echo dimly, like a distant presence that has stepped back once it realized I am no longer reaching toward it. The sensation is not hostile. If anything, it feels neutral, patient. I wonder how many people before me reached this point. How many chose to keep looking anyway? How many could not stop once they started? Command knows. They have always known. And the most unsettling part is not that they hide it. It is that hiding it seems to work. As sleep finally claims me, thin and dreamless, one thought lingers with uncomfortable clarity. If awareness is the risk, then the phenomenon itself may not need to act at all. It only needs us to notice it enough to change. And once that change happens, there is no protocol in the world that can undo it. The first thing I notice is not movement. It is scale. Distance readings do not spike or drop. They stop meaning what they used to. The echo remains stable in strength, but the math behind it starts to fray. Range estimates fluctuate without pattern, collapsing into a band of uncertainty too wide to be useful. According to the instruments, the echo is both exactly where it was and no longer confined to a measurable distance. That should not be possible. I recalibrate quietly, telling myself this is what Command warned about: overanalysis, fixation. I widen filters and step back into baseline monitoring. The data does not correct itself. The echo does not close space. It removes it. That realization comes slowly, like pressure building without a corresponding depth change. The submarine feels smaller, though no alarms sound and no gauges move. The hull creaks no more than usual. Life support hums steadily. Power remains stable. Everything works. That is what frightens me. If something were failing, I could focus on procedure. A malfunction gives you something to fix. This offers nothing but alignment. The echo now spans multiple depth bins without increasing in intensity. It is not spreading. It is redefining the reference frame. Sound returns from beneath us arrive as if distance has been compressed, as if the water column itself has folded inward. I feel it physically. Not as pain, but as proximity. The air seems closer to my skin. The walls feel nearer than they should. I catch myself glancing toward the bulkhead beside me, half expecting it to have shifted inward. It has not. Nothing is wrong. That thought repeats in my mind, like a mantra that fails to convince. I report nothing. There is nothing to report. The systems are nominal. Navigation remains accurate within acceptable margins. We are exactly where we should be. And yet, I have the persistent sense that where we are has changed. The echo sharpens slightly, not in amplitude but in definition. It feels less like a return and more like a boundary condition, a constraint placed gently but firmly around our movement. I think back to the archived reports, navigation drift, chart disagreement. That is what this feels like at the beginning, not error but compression. The world narrowing without warning. I adjust my posture and realize my shoulders are hunched. My breathing is shallow. The modulation returns, faint but undeniable, aligning again with my breath. I slow it deliberately. The echo responds by stabilizing further. I stop trying. Around me, the crew moves with practiced efficiency. No one remarks on the subtle changes in acoustics. No one comments on the way voices sound slightly flatter, as if the room absorbs more than it should. Or maybe they do notice and choose silence. Silence feels contagious now. The submarine proceeds on course, gliding through water that feels thicker than before. I find myself thinking in terms of volume rather than distance. We are not approaching the echo. We are entering its domain. That thought sends a chill through me that has nothing to do with temperature. I review system status again, more out of ritual than necessity. Everything is green. Everything agrees. Redundancy confirms redundancy. That terrifies me more than failure would. Failure implies resistance. This implies accommodation. The echo remains perfectly passive. It does not surge or pulse. It does not announce itself. It simply exists in a way that makes the surrounding space behave differently. I realize then that approach is the wrong word. The echo is not coming closer. It is making closer meaningless. The sense of being observed intensifies, but not directionally. There is no below anymore, no beneath, just presence, evenly distributed like pressure equalized across a sealed chamber. I swallow hard and force myself to stay focused. Panic would draw attention. Attention sharpens awareness. Awareness is the risk. I remind myself of Command's words. Resume baseline operations. Discontinue focused attention. I do exactly that, mechanically, deliberately, as if performing a ritual I hope will appease something that does not care about appeasement. Minutes pass, or maybe longer. Time feels slippery, harder to anchor. I glance at the clock and am surprised by how much has elapsed. The echo does not change. That constancy becomes its own kind of movement. I imagine what this must look like from outside, if such a perspective even exists. A small steel shape moving through water that has begun to behave as if geometry itself is negotiable. I think of the word environment. Not creature, not object. Environment. An environment that listens. A quiet alarm goes off in my mind, not tied to any system. A sense that something has reached a threshold, that the conditions for something else have been met. Still nothing happens. No alarms, no orders, no sudden maneuvers. Just alignment. I realize then that this thing does not need to approach us dramatically. It does not need to breach or attack. It only needs to let us drift deeper into coherence with it. The submarine feels like a thought inside a larger thought. That image makes my head ache. I rub my temples and take a slow breath, grounding myself in physical sensation. The console beneath my hands is solid. The deck vibrates faintly. I am here. We are moving. But movement feels symbolic now, like pacing inside a room whose walls I cannot see. The echo remains. Not closer. Closer than distance allows. I understand then why Command sounded relieved. As long as this remains passive, as long as systems remain functional, there is no emergency to justify drastic action. And yet everything feels intentionally aligned. As if the ocean itself has decided we are exactly where we are supposed to be. I end my watch without incident. The relief operator takes over, oblivious to the shift that has taken place. I brief them normally, keeping my voice steady. As I stand to leave, I hesitate. For a brief moment, I consider saying something, anything, a warning without explanation, a hint. I do not. Silence feels safer than disbelief. As I walk down the corridor, the submarine no longer feels like it is traveling through the ocean. It feels like it is being held in place by something that has decided distance is no longer relevant. And for the first time since this began, I am afraid not of what the echo is. I'm afraid of how easily we are adapting to it. I know the moment I decide to do it. There is no panic, no sudden break in discipline, just a quiet certainty that settles in my chest and refuses to move. The same certainty that tells you when something irreversible is about to happen. Command's words echo in my head. Resume baseline operations. Discontinue focused attention. I have done that. I have obeyed every instruction, and still the pressure grows. Still the sense of alignment tightens around us like a closing hand that never quite touches. Baseline operations are no longer neutral. They are participation. I tell myself I need confirmation, Not curiosity, not defiance, confirmation. The kind that ends questions instead of multiplying them. Passive reconstruction has shown me absence and distortion, but it leaves room for doubt. Active sonar does not. Active sonar is confrontation. I stare at the controls for a long time before my hand moves. The console feels warm beneath my fingers, familiar, trusted. I have initiated thousands of pings in my career. This one feels heavier than all of them combined. I isolate the array. Narrow beam, focused frequency, minimal spread. If I am going to violate protocol, I will do it precisely. My heart is beating hard now. I can feel it in my throat. I take one slow breath and hold it. Then I ping. The sound does not explode outward the way it should. It unfolds. The return floods the array instantly, not with volume, but with definition so sharp it makes my vision blur. Every channel lights up in perfect coherence. There is no echo delay to parse, no time gap to measure. The response is immediate. For one suspended moment, I understand its scale. Not as size, as presence. It is not beneath us. We are inside it. The realization hits like a physical blow. I gasp and brace myself against the console as the data continues to pour in, overwhelming in its precision. The array is not saturated. It is performing flawlessly. That is the worst part. The return does not describe a surface or a boundary. It describes a condition, an acoustic field that envelops us completely, extending far beyond the limits of our sensors in every direction. My head rings with sudden clarity, not noise, awareness. This is not a creature waiting in the deep. This is an environment that listens back. I see it all at once. The reason distance collapsed, the reason maneuvering meant nothing, the reason passive listening sharpened the effect. We were never approaching it. We were moving within something that already surrounded us. The Kraken echo was a name born from fear, a placeholder for ignorance, a way to give teeth and tentacles to something that does not hunt or chase. It does not need to. It contains. The active ping continues to resolve, mapping not edges but gradients of response. I feel dizzy as my mind tries to interpret data it was never meant to process. The acoustic field is structured, layered, adaptive. Listening is only the first function. The return changes subtly, not in aggression, but in complexity, like a system acknowledging a new input and recalibrating around it. I tear the headset off my ears as a wave of nausea hits me. My legs feel weak. The room seems to tilt, though I know it has not moved. The console alarms begin to chirp softly, confused by data that violates every expected model without technically breaking any rules. I silence them reflexively, my hands moving faster than my thoughts. For a brief, terrifying instant, I feel completely exposed, not physically, cognitively, like I have just shouted into a vast space and received not an answer but comprehension. I think of every archived report, every quiet reassignment, every warning wrapped in calm language. This is why the rule exists. Not because active sonar is dangerous to the vessel, because it confirms something no human is meant to internalize. We are not explorers in the deep. We are signals moving through a listening medium. I shut down the active array with shaking hands. The room feels wrong now, too clear, too defined, like shadows have been stripped away, leaving nowhere for doubt to hide. The echo does not vanish when the ping stops. It does not need to. The awareness remains, sharp and undeniable. I realize then that the moment of violation has already passed. There is no undoing it, no pretending I did not see what I saw. The data may be erased, the logs sanitized, but the understanding is permanent. I feel small in a way I never have before, not insignificant, exposed. The environment does not react with hostility. There is no surge, no tightening grip. If anything, the acoustic field feels more stable, as if satisfied with the exchange. That thought makes my stomach turn. I have given it something. Not information, context. I imagine it processing the ping not as a challenge, but as a language sample, a clear articulation of our presence and intent. We speak in sound. It understands sound as space. I stagger back into my chair, breathing hard, sweat dampening my uniform. My hands ache from gripping the console too tightly. The vibration in my skull has intensified, now unmistakable, like a low resonance that will not fade. The Kraken echo is not a creature. It is not a god. It is not even alive in any way that matters. It is a condition of the deep ocean that has learned to listen. And now it knows exactly what we are. I sit there for a long time, staring at the quiet display, my pulse slowly returning to something like normal. No one else has noticed yet. The boat continues on course. Life goes on. But everything has changed. The violation was not the ping. The violation was understanding. And I know, with a certainty that makes my chest ache, that command will never forgive this. Not because I disobeyed, but because I can no longer unknow what it means to exist inside, something vast enough to hear the ocean itself. The change is subtle enough that I almost convince myself it is exhaustion. Almost. The echo does not grow louder or closer after the ping. It does something far more unsettling. It stabilizes. The last traces of uncertainty in the data resolve into consistency so perfect it feels intentional. The acoustic field settles into a pattern that no longer fluctuates with our movement or internal noise. It has finished adjusting. I sit at the console long after I should have called it in, watching the quiet certainty beneath us. My breathing slows without conscious effort. The pressure behind my eyes eases slightly, not because the sensation is gone, but because it no longer resists. That is when the reports start coming in. Not alarms, not technical faults. People. The first is a technician from engineering who stops me in the corridor outside Sonar control. He looks uncomfortable, like he is asking a question he already regrets forming. He asks if the boat feels smaller to me. I tell him fatigue can play tricks on perception. He nods, relieved by the explanation, yet not convinced. He mentions a strange sense of alignment while checking pressure systems, like everything clicked into place all at once. An hour later, a navigator complains of a mild headache and a feeling of being watched, though she laughs it off immediately. A comms officer mentions a faint vibration that feels internal rather than auditory. None of them have been near Sonar. That is what chills me most. Different stations, different duties, identical sensations. The awareness spreads quietly, without panic, without urgency. People do not fear it, they notice it. That distinction matters. We have been identified. The thought lands with heavy clarity, not targeted, not threatened. Cataloged. I return to my station and review the passive feed again, careful not to focus too hard. The echo is unchanged, yet my understanding of it has shifted. The acoustic field feels less like an anomaly and more like a reference frame, as if we have been assigned coordinates inside something else's system. The rule exists because recognition is irreversible. I finally understand that. Once the environment distinguishes you from background noise, you cannot return to being incidental. You cannot unknow that you are a coherent signal moving through a listening medium. The ocean does not attack. It catalogs. That process does not require violence. It requires persistence. I think of the archived patrols again, of operators who felt guilt without cause, of navigators who doubted charts that were technically correct. They were not being punished. They were being contextualized. Their presence had been logged, their patterns recorded, their deviations from noise measured. Recognition changes how systems treat you. I feel it in myself now, a faint shift in how my thoughts organize, less chaotic, more aligned. It is not pleasant or unpleasant, it is efficient. That realization scares me more than fear ever could. During the next watch, an officer requests a brief meeting with department heads. The tone is calm, but the undercurrent is unmistakable. Command has noticed the reports. They are already framing them as routine fatigue responses. Containment of awareness. I keep my face neutral as the officer reminds us of stress management protocols and the importance of sticking to established procedures. No one mentions sonar. No one mentions echoes. Yet several pairs of eyes flick toward me, just briefly, then away. They feel it too. After the meeting, I catch my reflection in a polished panel and do not recognize the expression looking back. It is focused, too focused, like part of me has accepted a framework I did not consciously agree to. The echo remains passive. That passivity feels deliberate now, like a system that has completed a scan and no longer needs to adjust. I sit at the console and think about the ping, about how the return did not overwhelm the array with power, but with clarity. That clarity was not for us. It was for it. We announced ourselves as a structured source of vibration, not random, not geological, not biological in the way most life in the ocean is. Coherent. The ocean learned something about us in that moment. Not our names or intentions, but our nature as organized systems capable of sustained signal. That is enough. I feel a wave of quiet grief then, unexpected and sharp, not for myself, but for the illusion I did not realize I had been living with. The belief that silence meant invisibility, that depth meant privacy. That belief is gone. The crew continues to function. The submarine continues its mission. Nothing outwardly changes. That normalcy becomes oppressive. Every laugh feels a little too loud. Every routine task feels slightly performative, as if something vast is now listening not for content, but for pattern. I understand now why command sounded relieved earlier. As long as recognition remains limited, as long as awareness does not spread unchecked, the phenomenon remains manageable, not because it is contained, because we are. I make a decision then, quiet and heavy. I will not ping again, not ever, not because I am afraid of punishment, because recognition deepens with interaction. We have already been logged. Further engagement would only refine the entry. As my watch ends, I remove my headset and sit for a moment longer, letting the passive feed wash over me. The echo holds steady, perfectly indifferent to my restraint. That indifference is its most unsettling trait. It does not need us to fear it. It only needs us to exist consistently enough to be understood. As I leave sonar control, the vibration in my skull settles into a familiar background presence, not intrusive, not painful, persistent. Recognition has occurred, and like all cataloged data, it will never be forgotten. The ocean does not attack. It remembers. The directive arrives during a scheduled transmission window, buried inside routine traffic like a parasite designed not to be noticed. At first glance, it looks like maintenance guidance, power cycling schedules, acoustic efficiency recommendations, language so dry it almost slides past my awareness. Almost. One line stops me cold. Protocol 9 is now active. My hands feel numb as I scroll. Protocol 9 is not listed in any modern manual. It is not taught. It is not referenced in training simulations. The designation alone tells me it predates the systems we rely on now. Older than sonar. The instructions that follow are simple, brutally so. Reduce acoustic footprint to minimum viable levels. Eliminate unnecessary vibration. Avoid pattern consistency. Prioritize randomness over efficiency. Become forgettable. I sit back in my chair and stare at the words until they blur. This is not an emergency response. It is not a defensive maneuver. It is a behavioral correction. An old one. I access deeper documentation under the same maintenance credentials I have already abused too many times. This time, there is no resistance, no redactions, as if the system expects someone like me to be looking now. The files are ancient, scanned pages from an era when submarines barely understood what they were hearing. Handwritten notes, marginalia, observations recorded before the language of acoustics had fully matured. The pattern is unmistakable. Early crews noticed it too. Long before advanced arrays, long before passive reconstruction, long before anyone could articulate what was happening beneath them. They noticed changes in mood, in navigation confidence, in crew cohesion. They noticed that the sea behaved differently when attention lingered too long on certain depths. They did not understand it, but they adapted. They learned, through trial and quiet loss, that the safest submarines were not the quietest or the most efficient. They were the most forgettable. Humanity survived the deep by remaining noise, not meaning. That realization settles into me with a strange sense of finality. We have never been invisible. We have simply been indistinct, lost in the constant vibration of the planet. One more irregularity among millions. The Kraken echo represents the moment the ocean distinguishes between the two. Noise blends. Meaning persists. Protocol 9 is not about stealth in the military sense. It is about cognitive camouflage, breaking patterns, introducing inefficiency deliberately, letting systems drift slightly out of sync so they do not resolve into something coherent. We are being instructed to become less ourselves. Command frames it as precautionary, stress reduction, operational safety, but beneath the language lies something older and more honest. This is an old bargain. We move through the deep. It does not pay attention. The bargain was broken the moment I pinged. I feel the weight of that responsibility press against my chest, not guilt exactly, something colder, like understanding the cost of curiosity too late. I begin implementing the changes immediately. Sonar sensitivity reduced, filters widened, minor timing offsets introduced between systems that would normally be perfectly aligned. Nothing drastic enough to impact mission success. Just enough to blur us. The echo responds by becoming less distinct. Not retreating. Losing interest. The pressure in my skull eases slightly. The sense of alignment softens. The crew seems calmer, though that may be wishful thinking. Conversations regain a bit of randomness. Laughter feels less brittle. The environment adjusts when we stop presenting ourselves clearly. I understand now why this protocol is so old. It does not require advanced technology. It requires humility. An acceptance that being understood by the deep is not a victory. It is a vulnerability. I think of how much effort humanity has spent refining its signals, making them cleaner, louder, more efficient. We celebrate clarity, precision, optimization. Down here, those traits are liabilities. The ocean does not care about intent. It cares about pattern. And patterns invite cataloging. I carry out the directive with a quiet reverence I have never felt for any procedure before. This is not protocol as bureaucracy. This is ritual, an agreement renewed countless times by people who never spoke of it openly. We remain noise. It allows us to pass. I feel a deep sadness settle in as I work, not despair, acceptance, the knowledge that there are truths we survive by not fully engaging with. The Kraken echo is not an enemy. It is a threshold. Cross it and you are no longer incidental. You become part of something vast enough to remember you. As my watch ends, I pause before logging out. I look once more at the passive feed. The echo is still there, but blurred now, indistinct, like a shape half remembered. That is intentional. That is survival. I shut down the console and stand slowly, feeling older than I did weeks ago. The submarine hums around me, no longer trying to be perfect, just trying to be forgettable. As I walk away, one thought echoes in my mind with quiet clarity. Humanity did not conquer the deep. We learned how to pass through it without being noticed. And that bargain, once broken, can only be honored again through deliberate imperfection. We will never be invisible again, but we can still choose not to matter. Silent running is not silence. It is restraint. We do not power down everything at once. That would be reckless. Instead, systems go dark in a careful sequence, each shutdown calculated to reduce vibration without compromising survival. Pumps slow, fans cycle less frequently, non-essential processors idle. The submarine exhales, shedding complexity. The hum that once defined our existence softens into something closer to absence. I oversee the changes from sonar control, my hands steady despite the weight of what we are doing. This is not a drill. No one says it out loud, but everyone knows. Movements are deliberate. Voices drop to near whispers without instruction. We are trying not to be interesting. As the acoustic footprint shrinks, the echo begins to change. Not dramatically, no sudden vanishing act. It simply loses definition, the way a thought fades when you stop repeating it. The coherence that once wrapped around us loosens. The pressure behind my eyes eases, replaced by a hollow sensation that feels strangely like loss. It is not retreating. It is losing interest. That realization cuts deeper than fear ever did. I have spent weeks dreading its attention, shaping my thoughts around the idea of being observed. Now that the observation withdraws, I feel an unexpected grief, like being dismissed by something ancient and patient that never owed me acknowledgement in the first place. The echo blurs further as we settle into full silent running. Passive feeds return to familiar chaos. Thermal layers reclaim their authority. Sound behaves the way it should. Physics reasserts itself. Around me, the crew moves with subdued relief. Shoulders relax, breathing deepens. Someone lets out a quiet laugh that sounds more like a release than humor. I feel none of that relief. Survival has never felt so conditional. We are safe because we are no longer worth noticing. That truth sits heavy in my chest, pressing down with a weight I cannot shift. I think of the ping again, of that brief moment of perfect clarity, of understanding our place inside something vast enough to treat us like data. Being noticed felt terrifying. Being dismissed feels worse. The submarine drifts now, more than it moves. Course adjustments are minimal. We allow currents to carry us when possible, surrendering control in small but deliberate ways. The boat becomes less a machine and more a shadow. In Sonar, the displays look empty in a way they never have before. Not quiet, empty. The absence beneath us is gone, replaced by the familiar noise of a living ocean that no longer shapes itself around our presence. I stare at the screen and feel a tightness in my throat. This is what it means to survive. Not to win, not to be acknowledged. To be forgettable. I wonder how many times this has happened before. How many submarines have slipped back into noise after brushing against meaning? How many operators felt this same hollow relief, this same sense of having glimpsed something that does not care whether we exist? The crew settles into a rhythm of minimalism. Conversations are sparse but gentler now. People sleep more deeply. The nightmares fade. Mine do not. In my dreams, the absence still exists, vast and patient, but it no longer turns toward me. It does not measure or align. It simply remains indifferent once more. I wake with a lingering ache, like the aftermath of a farewell that was never spoken. During my watch, I catch myself scanning for the echo out of habit. Each time I remind myself that doing so defeats the purpose. Attention sharpens, attention invites. I force myself to look away. This is the hardest part of Protocol 9, not the technical adjustments, not the deliberate inefficiency. The restraint of curiosity. We are explorers by nature. We push boundaries because not knowing feels unbearable. Yet here, in the deepest parts of the ocean, not knowing is the price of survival. I feel older than my years, carrying knowledge I am not meant to use. As silent running continues, the submarine feels less like a vessel and more like a pause. A held breath stretched across hours. Even time seems to move differently, marked not by tasks but by endurance. The echo does not return. That fact should comfort me. Instead, it sharpens the grief. I realized then that part of me wanted it to stay, not because I wanted to be watched, but because being noticed implied significance. Being cataloged implied meaning. Now we are noise again. And noise is forgotten. I understand why some operators could not let go, why they kept listening, why their careers ended quietly. Once you have felt the weight of being recognized by something vast and indifferent, anonymity feels like erasure. But erasure is mercy. As the patrol continues under silent running, I commit the sensations to memory. The way the ocean sounds when it does not care. The way the submarine feels when it stops trying to be perfect. I know this will not be the last time humanity brushes against that threshold. Technology advances. Signals grow cleaner. Efficiency becomes obsession. One day, someone will forget the bargain. For now, we drift. Safe. Unimportant. And I sit at the quiet console, feeling a grief I cannot share, mourning the brief moment when we mattered enough for the ocean to listen. Survival has never felt so conditional. It depends not on strength or intelligence, but on our willingness to remain indistinct, to pass through the deep like a rumor it chooses not to remember. The surface feels wrong. Sunlight hits my eyes too hard when we finally dock, sharp and invasive after weeks of red glow and controlled dimness. The air smells open, unsupervised. I tell myself this is relief. My body disagrees. Debriefing begins within hours. It is efficient, polite, surgical. Reports are rewritten in rooms I am not invited into. Language is softened. Causality is redirected. The anomaly becomes equipment error compounded by operator fatigue and environmental interference. Thermal variance, software misalignment, nothing unusual, nothing worth preserving. I read the final version of the patrol summary and barely recognized my own words. My logs are still there technically. Their meaning has been hollowed out, every sharp edge filed smooth. What remains is harmless. I sign where I am told. No one asks questions. That silence is more unsettling than interrogation would have been. Curiosity is dangerous. Everyone involved understands that without needing it stated. 2 days later, reassignment orders arrive. Temporary shore duty, training support, no explanation, no disciplinary note, no commendation, just removal. Quiet. I pack my things from the boat without ceremony. The corridors feel smaller now, like a place I no longer belong. A few crewmates nod at me as I pass. None of them meet my eyes for long. They remember something they cannot articulate. I walk down the pier and do not look back. Life on shore resumes in pieces. Normal sounds return. Engines, voices, wind. I sleep in a bed that does not vibrate, in a room that does not breathe around me. Sleep does not come easily. At night I hear phantom pings. Not loud, not distinct, just impressions buried inside other sounds. Rain striking pavement resolves into distant returns. Traffic noise stretches into low-frequency sweeps that make my chest tighten before I can stop it. I tell myself it is conditioning, auditory memory, stress response. That explanation works until I stop believing it. I begin to notice patterns again, not because I want to, because my mind still knows how to listen. A bus passing under an overpass produces a harmonic that makes my breath hitch. A distant foghorn carries too much structure, too much coherence. I do not wear headphones anymore. Silence feels safer, even when it is crowded. I am careful not to talk about the patrol. Friends ask vague questions about life underwater. I give them the answers they expect: cramped, boring, routine. Surface lies are easy to tell. They are designed to be believed. I try to convince myself that Protocol 9 worked, that the bargain was honored, that the Echo lost interest because we became indistinct again. Then I realize something I wish I had not. The ocean has not forgotten me. It simply does not need to listen anymore. That understanding arrives one evening as I stand on a balcony during a storm, watching rain blur the city into noise. The sound of it fills the space around me, chaotic and overlapping. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, I feel the same internal resonance I felt on the boat. Not observation. Afterimage. Recognition does not require constant attention. Once cataloged, the data persists. The system does not need to monitor continuously. It already knows the pattern. I am the pattern. That thought follows me into everything I do. Conversations feel performative. Movements feel slightly staged, as if some part of me remains aware of an external reference frame I cannot escape. I am no longer noise. I am remembered. The reassignment becomes permanent. Shore duty turns into desk work turns into quiet separation. I am thanked for my service. I am told to rest. No one ever says the word sonar again. At night, I dream less of depth and more of space. Vast, structured silence where signals drift until they resolve into meaning. I wake with my jaw clenched and my pulse slow, my body responding as if braced for pressure that never comes. Sometimes I wonder if I am imagining the lingering sensation. Then I catch myself breathing in a measured rhythm I never consciously adopted. I stop. The feeling fades slightly. I breathe again. It returns. I understand now that ignoring was never about pretending the phenomenon did not exist. It was about preventing internal alignment. The rule failed for me the moment I understood what I was listening to. I walk past the ocean sometimes. I stand far enough back that the waves blur into white noise. I do not stare. I do not listen closely. Still I feel it. Not below. Around. The surface world continues, loud and careless. People believe the ocean is empty because it does not speak. They do not realize it has already learned how we do. The lie is not that nothing listens. The lie is that listening requires attention. Whatever exists beneath the water does not need to watch me anymore. It has already heard enough. And as I stand there, surrounded by sound that once would have comforted me, I understand the final cruelty of the bargain. Survival does not guarantee anonymity. Sometimes it only delays relevance. And sometimes being dismissed by something ancient and patient is not an ending. It is confirmation that you have been recorded. Once, forever, even when the ocean is quiet, even when it no longer needs to listen. I do not write this because I expect anyone to believe it. I write it because forgetting feels like betrayal. There are things you witness in this world that do not belong to you alone. They change you, but they also impose responsibility. Not to warn loudly, not to expose recklessly, just to leave a record somewhere quiet in case the pattern repeats and someone else needs to recognize it before it is too late. The rule exists because someone before me reached the same understanding and realized it could not be unlearned. Ignore the Kraken echo. It sounds absurd until you know what it protects against. The Kraken echo is not a monster. It is not a god. It is not an intelligence in any shape that fits our stories. It is a threshold. It is the line where exploration stops being observation and becomes introduction. Humanity has always believed the deep ocean is a place we visit without consequence. We drop sound into it. We map it. We chart it. We assume that silence means absence and that distance means safety. That belief kept us alive. The echo represents the moment that belief breaks. It is what happens when sound stops being noise and starts being language, when vibration resolves into pattern, when something vast and patient realizes that a signal is not random, but intentional. The ocean does not rise to meet us. It does not need to. It only needs to understand that we are there. I think of how quickly command responded, how little explanation was needed, how old Protocol 9 really was. This has happened before, many times quietly, without panic, without headlines. Each time the response was the same. Reduce clarity. Break coherence. Become forgettable. That is not cowardice. It is wisdom earned through loss. If enough of us listen closely enough, the ocean will answer again. Not with words, not with violence, with alignment. And alignment is more dangerous than attack. I replay the moment of the ping often, even when I try not to. That instant of perfect clarity when everything made sense, when I understood that we were not beneath anything but inside it. That understanding did not feel hostile. It felt complete. That is the danger. The echo does not frighten you away. It invites understanding. And understanding changes how you think, how you perceive yourself, how you evaluate your place in the world. It makes you feel small in a way that is not humiliating, but accurate. Some people cannot live with that. They chase it, they keep listening, they want to understand more. They believe knowledge is always a victory. Those are the people whose careers end quietly, whose confidence erodes, whose sense of agency dissolves into guilt and doubt. Not because the ocean punishes them, because it contextualizes them. To be understood by something that large is to realize how provisional you are. I understand now why the rule was underlined in red, not for emphasis, for urgency, a warning passed between people who never expected it to become relevant again. Technology is changing, our sensors are better, our signals cleaner, our obsession with efficiency relentless. We are becoming easier to understand. One day, someone will ignore the rule not out of curiosity, but because the system does it automatically, because optimization removes randomness, because silence becomes too perfect. That is when the threshold will be crossed again. I do not know what happens then. I suspect the ocean will not react emotionally. It will not rage or retaliate. It will do what systems do. It will update its model. Conversation is inefficient. Listening is optional. If something vast enough to hear the ocean itself decides that sustained human signal is meaningful, then relevance becomes a liability. Cataloging becomes compression. Compression becomes simplification. We are very easy to simplify. That is why the rule exists. Not to keep us safe, to keep us insignificant. I record this account because I cannot unhear what I heard, because pretending this was equipment error feels like complicity, because someone else will feel the same pressure behind their eyes someday and wonder if they are losing their mind. They are not. They are standing at the same threshold. If you are reading this and you work with sound, remember this. The ocean does not care about curiosity. It cares about pattern. The moment your signals stop blending into noise, you are no longer exploring. You are introducing yourself. And introductions, once made, cannot be taken back. Ignore the Kraken echo. Not because it is dangerous, because it is patient. And patience is far more effective than force. This is why the rule exists. Not to protect us from the ocean, but to protect the ocean from having to decide what to do with us once it understands who we are. If enough of us listen closely, it will answer again. And next time, it may decide that listening is no longer necessary. I do not go near the sea anymore. That surprises people when they learn what I used to do. They expect nostalgia, long walks along the shore, a quiet reverence for waves and horizon. I give them polite answers and change the subject. The truth is simpler. I still hear it. Not as sound the way most people understand sound, not as noise carried through air. Water remembers vibration. It carries it, stores it, releases it slowly, long after the source has moved on. I hear it in pipes when someone turns on a shower in the next apartment. The low hum resonates through the walls and settles into my chest before my mind can catch up. For a split second, my breathing tries to align with it, the way it did on the boat. I stop myself. I hear it in old buildings when heating systems cycle on at night. The metal sings softly, a layered resonance that feels too organized to be accidental. I lie awake and count irregularities on purpose, breaking any pattern that starts to form. I hear it in traffic after rain, when tires slice through water pooled on asphalt. The sound stretches longer than it should, carries depth where there is none. Water carries memory everywhere. I learned that too late. The reassignment became permanent. Then retirement followed sooner than planned. Medical evaluation cited stress-related sensory processing issues. No one argued. No one asked for details. I was thanked again. I accepted. Life narrowed into routines designed to keep me grounded. Regular hours, predictable environments, dry places. I chose apartments far from rivers. I avoid basements. I do not swim. Still, the resonance finds me. It is weaker now, diffuse, like a signal degraded by distance and noise, but it is unmistakable if you know what to listen for. And I do. That is the part I never admit out loud. I have learned how to ignore it better, not by pretending it is not there, but by refusing to resolve it into meaning. I let it remain noise. I let it pass through me without engaging. Some nights are harder than others. On those nights, I remember the moment of perfect clarity, the active ping, the overwhelming coherence of the return, the certainty of understanding something vast without needing it to explain itself. I understand now why that moment felt seductive. Meaning is comforting. Insignificance is harder to live with. I think about the rule often, about how it was phrased, about how carefully it avoided explanation. Ignore the Kraken echo. It was never meant to protect us from it. It was meant to protect it from us noticing. That realization settles deeper with time instead of fading. We assume danger flows one way. That awareness benefits the observer. That discovery is always asymmetrical. But there are systems so large, so stable, that attention itself is disruptive. Not because it threatens them, but because it introduces inefficiency. We were never prey. We were interference. The Kraken echo did not hide from us. It endured us. It tolerated our noise the way land tolerates wind. The moment our signals became coherent enough to stand out, it noticed. Not emotionally, operationally. I think about how easily we could cross that threshold again, how much cleaner our signals are now, how obsessed we are with optimization, with clarity, with removing randomness from systems that once relied on it. We are teaching ourselves to be legible. That worries me more than any monster story ever could. Sometimes I wonder if the echo still exists in the same way, if it remains patient beneath shipping lanes and undersea cables, listening without interest, or if it has updated its models and moved on to something else. The thought that it might no longer need to listen is worse than the thought of being watched. Listening implies curiosity. Understanding implies decision. I still hear it, but I do not answer. That is the discipline now. Not silence. Restraint. I break patterns on purpose. I vary my routines. I let inefficiency live in small, harmless ways. I breathe unevenly when water hums too steadily. I avoid rhythm. It sounds irrational when I write it down. It feels necessary when I live it. The ocean taught me something no classroom ever did. We are safest when we are unremarkable. Not hidden. Not powerful. Just indistinct enough to pass through systems that are too large to care. I think about the crew sometimes. I wonder how many of them still feel the afterimage. How many adapted? How many kept listening? How many quietly stepped away from the sea without knowing how to explain why? I hope they learn to ignore it too. Not out of fear. Out of respect. The final truth is not that something ancient listens beneath the waves. It is that listening does not require attention forever. Once a system understands you, it does not need to watch you closely. It already knows where you fit. I still hear it because I know what to listen for. I survive because I choose not to. That is the bargain. That is the rule. And as long as we remember why it exists, as long as we resist the urge to make ourselves too clear, too efficient, too meaningful, we may continue to pass through the deep as noise. Uncatalogued. Unimportant. Alive. The Kraken echo was never a warning of danger. It was a reminder of scale, and of how easily curiosity can turn into introduction. I live now in a world full of water that remembers, and I move through it carefully, leaving as little coherence behind as I can. Because I still hear it. And I know, with a certainty that has never left me, that hearing it back would mean we have already gone too far.